Hello, YouTube friends. I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and welcome to this, my latest video. Today I'm going to talk about the Mars retrograde of 2022 into 2023. So today is Sunday, the 30th of October, 2022. It's the day before Samhain, aka Halloween. So Halloween, when Christianity appropriated Samhain, it was called Halloween. And I'll get into a little bit of what Samhain is later. But it is the end of the, basically the agricultural and the lunar new year, really. So, very important time for Mars to be retrograding. So before I get into it, thank you to everybody who watches the channel, likes the videos, subscribes, comments, and shares. It's very encouraging. It's helpful to the channel. And I appreciate you very much. If you're not yet a subscriber, I ask you to consider doing so. So let's get into this. So, Mars today, let me see. The stationing, the actual stationing was about 9:45, quarter to 10 a.m. here on the East Coast of the USA. And again, Sunday, October the 30th. So Mars is stopped at this 1 degree of Gemini in the sidereal astrology reckoning. In the Western tropical astrology is at 25 Gemini. So, and I think this is kind of a big Mars retrograde. So retrogrades get catastrophized in the mainstream, and people are like, "Oh, it's a Mercury retrograde," because Mercury is the most frequent retrograder. And retrograde is when a planet seems to move backwards from our point of view on Earth. And it's because of the difference in the orbits of the different planets, where they seem to move backwards. So Mercury goes retrograde a lot. People freak out and act like it's a crisis. Retrogrades are just all about dealing with themes from the past. So going back and correcting and reviewing and getting a new look on themes, things in our lives that fall into the themes that a given planet deals with. And basically, we have to deal with things from the last retrograde, from the last time it retrograde. So Mars retrogrades every 2 years. And so Mars will be in retrograde for what? A little over 2 months. So it's going to be from today, October the 30th, 2022, to January the 12th, 2023, and then it's going to be in shadow until March the 15th, until the Ides of March. So, yeah. Retrogrades are not disasters. They're just a time to go back and take another look. Not a great time to initiate new things and move forward. It's more about correcting things from the past, taking another look at things from the past. So what is Mars? Mars is our energy, it's our vitality, it's our drive, it's our get up and go. It's also our lust. And then Mars deals with warrior energy, sports, engineering, building, even things like surgery, weapons, and even not just building, but even destruction. And destruction is a necessary thing. So a lot of different themes here. So Mars is going to start its retrograde in Gemini, regardless of what zodiac you're using, whether it's sidereal, visible sky, or whether it's Western tropical. So Gemini is a sign that deals with communication and thinking. It's the yang sign of Mercury. So Virgo is the yin sign, and that is like very careful, very methodical thinking and communication. That's like when you're dealing with like a lawyer or a CPA. So somebody who does a lot of research, a lot of calculation, and it's like they work in a quiet space very often. Now Gemini has more of like a kind of on your feet, think on your feet kind of vibe, like a teacher. It deals with media, things like reality TV. It's very shoot from the hip, off the cuff, and its energy is all over the place. So Mars in Gemini can be very scattered. It's like the energy of Mars is not pointing in any one direction. It's kind of looking all over and, running around, starting one thing, jumping to the next, jumping to the next. So interesting place to retrograde because it's not a great place for Mars to get things done. When it comes to communication, which Gemini deals with, anger does not make for great communication very often. Sometimes you have to communicate and voice your anger. But if you're out of balance mentally, sometimes your message doesn't come across the way you intend. Sometimes you say things you regret. So those are all themes here. I think things will be communicated, especially through media, that somebody will regret through this retrograde. So yeah, this is going to be a time. So Mars, all of this energy and vitality and desire to build and destroy and fight. Being in Gemini, it's going to deal with media and communication. So and then you start getting into the lunar mansions. So this is interesting. So in the sidereal, which I look at primarily, Mars is in Prometheus. So Prometheus is a really interesting figure. Prometheus is one of these gods of fire. And this lunar mansion, Prometheus, is ruled by Mars. So Mars is in kind of a like a safe, familiar place, even though it's in Gemini, which is Mercury's sign. So yeah, Prometheus is a god of fire, like Loki, Lucifer. The name Lucifer, Loki, they come from an Indo-European word. Another name for Indo-European is Aryan. Indo-European word Lukke, so Lukke, which deals with, it stands for like a flash of lightning or a spark that starts a forest fire from a strike of lightning, and it's a flash of intellectual and spiritual brilliance, an aha moment. And so all of these deities, Prometheus, Lucifer, Loki, they are rulers and masters of forbidden knowledge, hidden information, secret knowledge. It's information that once you're privy to it, you never see things the same again. The world, your life, the times you live in. So, like I'm always talking about, we're not going to have the undisputed headlines that cause everybody to have the same emotional reaction and get in lockstep, as countries and as communities. But some people will seize upon this new information that comes out. And I think it's sort of bursting at the seams and it's ready to come out. So, pretty interesting. Depending on what chart you look at it in. So yeah, but I think for this Mars retrograde, via the media, some very hidden, secret knowledge will come out. Things that were very well hidden. I'm thinking it's probably going to, involve some sort of a whistleblower of some kind, which is often the way it happens. Now, some whistleblowers are not genuine. Some of them work for the establishment. It's all a show. I've wondered about Edward Snowden, for example. Well, is he just a safety valve for NSA? Did they just throw out some information they could afford to lose in order to get us, we the people, off their backs? Hard to say with that one. But yeah, with this Mars retrograde, I think we're going to see something like that. And I think when we look at the lunar mansion for where it's taking place in the tropical Western zodiac, it's Artemis. I'll get more into this later, why I think what I'm about to say, but I think because of the lunar mansion Artemis, where the retrograde starts in the tropical zodiac, I think it's a planned sort of disclosure, kind of whistleblow, but planned by the people who own not just the politicians, but then the financiers above them, and the self-appointed billionaire world leaders like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, Elon Musk. I think a process is starting where all of these administrators, these hired managers that work for, the real principals in the world, they're going to be sold out as the system we live in starts coming down. So yeah, after this whole eclipse on the 25th, I think we're going to see financial markets turn down until like April, May. And it's going to get this process rolling. And then with, like I talked about in my last video, with changes of leadership here in the US and then around the world, it's going to get this process going. So yeah, let's look at this from the sidereal aspect first. So 1 degree of Gemini, where Mars is now stationed and it's going to retrograde from. So it's going to spend most of this retrograde in Taurus because it's going to go all the way back to 14 degrees near Aldebaran. Aldebaran is one of the royal stars, and it basically deals with things like wealth, fame, just sort of like living it up, really. But the interesting thing is that Aldebaran, when planets conjunct it, like let's say you're born with, even one of your benefics like Jupiter, Venus, Moon, and Aldebaran, you may achieve wealth and fame, but you're not going to hold on to it. It's like fleeting glory. It's like fleeting fame and wealth. A lot of time people will gain these things, but then it doesn't make them happy, and they just sort of stay miserable, and they have problems with addictions, and they fall from grace. So with this Mars starting this retrograde in Prometheus and going back to Taurus, and then stationing again 1 degree from Aldebaran, I think we're going to learn about the misdeeds of corporate leadership and leadership within the financial world. So my first 2 candidates are, banking, like BlackRock, Vanguard, these hedge funds that own all these companies that do very nefarious things. They're always involved, but then, the legal government-sanctioned drug dealers, can't really say their names on YouTube anymore, but they deal the doctor-prescribed drugs. They sponsor 60% of the media. The better way to say that, they provide 60% of media sponsorship. So they're always looking for ways to sell their shit. And really, what's been going on since 2020, it's like the left or the Democratic Party's version of the invasion of Iraq. So back in 2002, led by the Republicans, but also with Democrats like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton joining in, the intelligence about Saddam Hussein possessing weapons of mass destruction was faked in order to have a justification for the U.S. and its allies to invade Iraq, so that weapons companies, so-called defense companies, defense contractors, and oil companies and banks owned by BlackRock and Vanguard could have a justification for going and looting Iraq and stealing everything of value. So the left and the Democratic Party has done this, and they've had this, this Wuhan cooties crisis to do that. So it's the same thing. It's the same strategy, the same media marketing campaign, but for a different audience. So really, when you look at these 2 sides of politics, left and right in the Western world, people on the right often, they admire people who just take whatever they want. And then people on the left, they love stories about victims and people who've been put upon, and they relate to that, and they love to sort of indulge their savior complex to go and save, they don't save people directly, but in the Western world, we have this thing where we think we're heroes. if we know how to turn on a television and watch the correct news channel and have the correct hatreds and prejudices, because all, church and politics, it's about having the correct prejudices and hating the right people and feeling good about that. So they're all the same, but that's how, dysfunctional relationships work. People who are almost identical can't stand each other, and they're always accusing each other of ruining the other's life. So yeah, that's how that stuff is. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. So yeah, with this Mars starting this retrograde in Prometheus, that is 1 degree of Gemini going back to Taurus, we're going to find out all kinds of illegal shit that people have been doing to make money. But the whole world won't believe it, because people just are getting more divided. They can't agree on things. So, and when you look at these signs, Gemini's quick-witted, quick thinking, but it's also kind of scattered, and then Taurus can be very lazy and self-indulgent, and we're ruled by lazy, self-indulgent, very wealthy people. So yeah, misdeeds will come out. Then when you get into Artemis, so this is the lunar mansion where Mars is stationing and starting its retrograde in the tropical zodiac. Artemis is sort of this kind of all-present, ever-present goddess. So Artemis was this huntress, this goddess of the hunt. She had a magic bow and a quiver of magic arrows, and the arrows would return to her. So Artemis had some different, she sort of existed in the 3 worlds. So the heavens, and then on Earth, and then in the underworld. So it's just like our 3 centers, our 3 selves, but in macrocosm. So basically the outside world, and this is a premise that astrology functions on. The outside world is a projection of your inner world, your psyche. So we have our higher self, our middle self, and our lower self. So Artemis in the heavens is Selene or Luna. She's the moon. Artemis on Earth is Diana, goddess of the hunt. And then in the underworld, Artemis is Persephone. So this goddess of, spring and the agriculture and the harvest. And basically Persephone, in the mythology lives on Earth for half the year and then goes into the underworld after the fall equinox to live with her husband Pluto. And on the spring equinox, she comes back and all the vegetation comes back. So this goddess is basically like literally everywhere. And people think this stuff is conspiracy theory and, silly and all that stuff. But when you look into the writings of powerful people, they know that there is some secret sort of control system running behind the systems of politics and international finance and, corporate leadership. Even President Woodrow Wilson, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, there is a power in the world that none of us in the halls of power speak about disparagingly over our breaths, because it's like they're listening and they're going to know. So, and that's an interesting thing when you get into secret societies. All of their symbols are female. There's hardly a male symbol in secret societies, even if they're male-only ones. So they are basically always paying tribute to a goddess. This is like with the layout of Washington, D.C. I don't want to get going on a tangent in that, but a lot of it's chock full of goddess symbolism. It's an understatement to say there's a lot. World capitals in general are full of female symbolism, with the domes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think this Artemis can be symbolic of there's some sort of secret control group, secret society that will basically facilitate the spilling of the beans into the world media. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of media will be inducing a lot of anger. Media does this all the time because media is, again, it's funded by the big banks, the big drug dealers, the weapons companies, the oil companies. And since they're writing the checks for the networks, they tell the networks how to report the news. And it's all about presenting the information to elicit a very specific set of emotional responses from the population so that they will think about the issues in a certain way and do things in a very certain way. Or they use reverse psychology and drive people the other way, which still works for them. But yeah, with this media anger, I think it's going to be used to basically sell out who we call the global elite, the deep state. We're ramping up for several years of relative chaos. And, a lot of people think we're going to go back to the pre-2020 world any day now. That couldn't be farther from the truth. So don't hold your breath on that one. So, yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. Anger generated by the media about money and about business leadership. Because Taurus is not only money and resources, but it also stands for business leaders and financial leaders. So there's going to be some anger coming down on them and some revealing of what they've been up to. But I think it's not, it's not some accidental thing where, somebody just has a conscience, a crisis of conscience and just has to tell the media something. It'll be an engineered event with a very specific purpose in mind by a group, I think, that's working well above the heads of not just the politicians, but then their financiers, again, George Soros, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, above all those clowns. And they're all going to get sold out little by little. So let's look at a few different charts here. So when you put this, actually, before we get into the charts, another comment that I want to make about this Mars retrograde. I want to put it in a bit of an historical context. So yeah, Mars has a retrograde, every 2 years. It comes back to the signs repeat. So the last one should have been in 2008. So what was that, like 14 years ago? But Mars actually skipped. So instead of having a retrograde in Gemini Taurus, it was in Cancer Gemini, sidereally speaking. So basically, like, the themes of the Mars retrogrades will repeat about every 14 years. This last one jumped. So we haven't had a similar Mars retrograde since about 1990 into 1991. So back then, it retrograded in the low degrees of Gemini like it is now and went back to Taurus. So 1990 and 1991 is a very formative period for the period of time we're living in now. So right around that time, the Cold War was basically ended. The Soviet Union was falling. The whole communist bloc in Europe was breaking up. And we had a recession because all the countries ran out of money. Basically, the Soviet Union was not given any more funding. Soviet Union was funded by Wall Street the entire time. I've known people who are in the intelligence community, and they believe the whole story of the Cold War. Then they got to Moscow. This is in the 1980s. And they saw that Chase Manhattan Bank had a giant branch office there. And they started figuring out through spying on it that basically the people from the Soviet Union's equivalent of the Treasury were going there to get loans. So yeah, they kind of lost their faith at that point. So yeah, and if you look at the work of Professor Anthony Sutton, he shows you how all of America's enemies in the last 100 years have been really created and funded by Wall Street. So books like Wall Street and the Rise of the Bolsheviks, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, and Wall Street and FDR, the best. And then he wrote another book, The Best Enemies Money Can Buy. Pretty interesting. So, yeah, so this last Mars retrograde, again, from Gemini going back into Taurus, 1990, 1991. So Cold War coming down, the recession, Gulf War I. Gulf War I was interesting because the U.S., the powers that be in the U.S. basically owed the Arab oil states in the Gulf a favor. So around 1990, the writing on the wall was a recession was coming. You know, there's going to be some kind of financial collapse. So the Kuwaitis and the Saudis and, you know, some other Gulf states bought 10% of the bank stocks in America to prop up the banks. So it was a bailout, basically. But it wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts. So then what ended up happening was the Kuwaitis they were doing this slant drilling. So they weren't just drilling for oil straight down. They were actually going at an angle. And their wells would actually penetrate across the border into Iraq, and they were draining Iraq's oil fields. Because you drill so many thousand feet, you can go horizontally, you know, significantly far. So Saddam Hussein was pretty pissed, and he told the Kuwaitis to stop, and they wouldn't. And they said, "Fuck you, America's protecting us." So Saddam invaded. So these Gulf oil states called in the favor, and America invaded, and they had a chance to test some new military technology and psyops technology, mind control technology, all kinds of shit, communication technology. Cruise missiles made their debut. So, interesting time. New weapons came about, new technologies. Yugoslavia broke up. You had, you know, this term Balkanization. So Yugoslavia broke into several countries, and, you know, they were divided and started fighting after a while. You know, the Serbs got blamed for the whole thing, but, you know, they were all equally rotten. I think we're going to see this in the coming years. We're going to see countries break up, possibly even the USA. And then you had German unification. So German unification, that's an interesting one because the European Union is basically the new German Empire. And this was proven when Greece told the European Central Bank back in like 2010 that they might default on their debt. And because they were bankrupt and they just couldn't even make the payments. And so Germany, it was actually Angela Merkel, the prime minister then, threatened to invade Greece with the German military if they didn't keep servicing the debt. So think about it. So we're back in these times where, you know, these financial and commercial empires want to make big moves. Definitely the Chinese and the Russians are upcoming empires, and they basically got the shaft from the U.S. and from Britain after World War II. You know, Russia and China fought at least 90% of World War II. They did all the heavy lifting. And then the U.S. and Britain tried to act like they won, and they tried to implement an economic and financial world order on the whole world. And they basically had a gun to the world's head with the atom bombs. And the Chinese and the Soviets weren't going to put up with that after pretty much fighting the whole war. So that's why the Cold War started. So we're getting ready for a shift in the whole world order here too. And that stands to reason with Mars being retrograde in Taurus. So, yeah, definitely too some destruction of the financial and some rearranging of the financial order that we've lived under. You know, we keep having these rising food prices and rising gas prices and more inflation that, you know, people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you know, just laugh at when they're questioned about it. So, yeah, it's gonna be several years before that stuff lets up. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that. But yeah, very similar times to 1990, 1991. You're going to see a lot of countries split up during this decade, in my opinion. And then this Mars is going to be, it ends its retrograde on January the 12th, but then it'll be in shadow until March 15th. So it'll take 2 more months to move out of the degrees that it retrograded in between October 30th and January 12th. So let's look at some charts. Let's discuss some charts briefly before I sign off. So you look at America's chart here. America is a Sagittarius ascendant. Gemini is the 7th house of partners, spouses, friends, business associates, and enemies. And so this Mars will start retrograding there. It'll go back to Taurus, which is America's 6th house of health, disease, poisons, medicines, illness, struggles, conflicts, and enemies. So a lot of layers to that. I think this is the last push for wearing the face diapers long term, and people still raising hell about the Wuhan cooties crisis, and urging other people to become medical experiments. So there's not much more of that left, but this is like the last push. And this winter is going to be rough. And I hate to say it, but especially for people who got the needlecraft, this untested needlecraft, especially multiple doses of it. So I hope everyone comes out of this all right. But I think this is going to be a rough winter. I see a lot of people getting sick already. There are schools around the U.S. where like half the student body has been sick for weeks. Half the teachers have been sick for weeks. And the October 25th eclipse, you had Venus eclipsed with the sun. So Venus is our like health and well-being, and just our ability to feel good and at ease. So yeah, it'll be a rough winter, until about April or so. So then we move to some leaders, and Mr. Joseph Biden, he has this taking place going from his 8th house back to his 7th. So this is interesting because, again, Mars, one thing it deals with violence, attacks. It deals with weapons, so blades, darts, even needles. Going back to his 7th house of friends, partners, but then enemies. So you have a Mars, sometimes certain Mars transits through your 7th house, or even these retrogrades that go from the 8th to the 7th, you could be attacked in some way. And the 8th house deals with scandals, secrets, conspiracies, all of the whole hidden side of life and the things people don't talk about in so-called, what is that? I just lost the expression. Polite company, that's what I wanted to say. So yeah, something wild could happen to him. And again, he acquired his 5th needlecraft on the morning of the damn solar eclipse. That Libra took place sidereal in his 12th house of hospitalization, isolation, and moksha, aka death. And then the lunar on November 8th will come in his 6th house of health, disease, illness, wellness, poison, medicine. Poison medicine, as it were. There are poison medicines out there. So, yeah, pretty wild for him. Ms. Kamala Harris, one of the best friends of the Prison Corporation of America, she's so progressive and so compassionate that she put thousands of African Americans in prison for petty marijuana possession. She was a prosecutor in Oakland, California. this is gonna whoop her ass. So this 1 degree of Gemini in her birth chart, that is her ascendant degree. And the north node of the moon, aka the dragon's head, aka Rahu, is right on her ascendant degree, 1 degree Gemini. So to have a Mars retrograde on your ascendant, that can be pretty damn rough and cause you to be very angry. And then it causes you setbacks because Mars is moving forward, charging forward. Mars retrograde is moving backwards. So her life is really going to start moving backwards and go sideways for her. She's going to be angry. She's going to maybe do some sneaky shit and get caught because Mars and Rahu together. That can be like secret criminal activity. But since it's backwards, it's probably having to do with sketchy things she's done in the past. So that's going on for her. I think Mr. Biden will be incapacitated sometime in the near future. She will ascend to the Iron Throne, but she's going to be like Daenerys Targaryen. She won't last long. She'll be physically safe, but her public reputation and public image will be absolutely destroyed by her own party and even by the left-leaning media. They've already started making fun of her. Very shockingly, because her party, usually the darlings of the media. So it's like her public image will be sacrificed. And this is all about demoralizing people, because subversion and propaganda really at the end of the day are about demoralizing people. Because once a population is demoralized, they'll believe anything you tell them. So people have been so relieved that, Orange Man is out of the Iron Throne. But Dementia Man will be incapacitated, and then Kamala will be destroyed. Another thing with her, having the dragon's head, Rahu, the north node, in her ascendant house, everything she gets in life, she has to earn. So she can't ride someone's coattails, and she will have ridden Dementia Man's, Mr. Biden's coattails to the Iron Throne. So it's not going to last for her. Now, the other one too, that I thought was interesting, Xi Jinping is going to be some kind of pissed off. So Xi Jinping, the ruler of China, all these people are puppet rulers. He's not the actual ruler. You look at that guy, he's like a shark. Like, you look at his eyes, he's like a shark. And that's interesting. It's just like kind of cold and empty. Can't get a birth time for him, and he probably hasn't disclosed his real birth date. But there's no lying in the spirit world. And, astrology is very connected to the divine component of our universe. So even if you give a fake birthday, you're unconsciously, or your handlers or staff are unconsciously going to give a fake birthday that will reveal everything about you that people need to know. So 2 ways to look at his chart here. So if you put his moon in the ascendant house, he's a Cancer, and he's got that moon conjunct with Ketu. So moon and Ketu is basically Ketu, the dragon's tail, also symbolized by a body without a head. It doesn't think. It just feels. It doesn't think. It can be very rash. It can be fundamentalist. It can be like an ideological fundamentalist, a religious fundamentalist. It swallows his thinking. So this says that he is an emotional person who doesn't think. So, and also, like, K2 also deals with selflessness. Selflessness is a very dangerous thing. All the communists, the Nazis, the crusaders, the people holding the witch trials, jihadists, they're all very selfless. They just do what they're told. They don't ask questions. So they're tools, basically. And yeah, he's definitely a tool. So if you look at it with the moon in the ascendant, the Mars retrogrades, it conjuncts his natal sun, which is 0 degrees Gemini. in his 12th house. So 12th house of losses in foreign places. So to have the Mars retrograde there, it's a lot of anger and fire and setbacks. So it's basically like he's losing power, losing ground due to setbacks. And with the 12th house being foreign places, projects that he's working on in and with foreign places are going to suffer. So, Chinese intelligence and Chinese businesses have infiltrated pretty much every institution in America. So, but somehow that plan's going to be disrupted. They want us to wear diapers on our faces, just like people in China do even on a good day where there's no, cooties crisis. So, yeah, he'll be angry about some loss in foreign places and just some loss and setback in general. Now, the other way to look at a chart when you don't have a birth time, you put the sun in the ascendant. So he's got a Mars retrograde on top of his sun in the ascendant. All kinds of big anger about setbacks. So, pretty interesting. That's about it for now. I'm going to leave it at that. But, a little sneak preview. The political contest day here in America, November the 8th, 2022, going to be an absolute shit show. You've got the maximum for the lunar eclipse in Aries, which deals with leadership of all kinds, at 6 a.m. here on the east coast of the USA. So the morning where all of the self-righteous little TV watching Americans go, when they go that morning or that day, when they go to cast their opinion in the opinion poll, that day will be doomed because right at sunrise, you've got a damn lunar eclipse. So it's the full moon is eclipsed. So, and, it's a Rahu eclipse. The moon will be, it's not, so a full moon, it's the Earth's shadow blocking the moon, but then you have the nodes of the moon involved too. So it's going to be Rahu, and Rahu deals with computer technology and deals with trickery. So people will be screaming about election yay, odd fray. So I'll get more into that later. Thanks for tuning in. Just wanted to get this out there. Have a nice one.